Hello guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be reviewing and reacting to your NHL mock trades that you guys submitted for the 2022 trade deadline. Now if you don't know, over the past week on YouTube, on Twitter, everywhere, we put out a call to action to you guys to send in your trade ideas that you could see happening at the deadline this year, and we got some absolutely amazing ones. But when it comes to your trade ideas, which were the best, which were the worst, and which ideas could I actually see happening at this year's NHL trade deadline? Watch till the end for the best of your guys' ideas, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already to the Sportsnet YouTube channel, the best sports content around. And without further ado, let's get into the shenanigans that you guys came up with. Now, we're first going to go through the trade ideas from the YouTube shorts, and one of the first ideas we got came from Dusty Fishbowl, a legendary name, and he proposes a pretty big deal between the Oilers and the Blackhawks. For the Oilers, they will receive Dominic Kubalik, a second-round pick, and Marc-Andre Fleury. In exchange, the Blackhawks get Mike Smith, Tyson Barrie, and a first-round pick. Now, this trade is interesting because with Kubalik and Fleury, those two guys solve pretty big holes. You got some more depth scoring, and you got a starting goaltender who can actually play in the playoffs, which Mike Smith definitely cannot. Now, it might be maybe Mikko Koskinen instead of Mike Smith to make the cap work, but I think you're getting in the right direction. At the same time, though, Chicago has announced their rebuild, so I feel like they'd rather have a defensive prospect like a Dmitry Samorukov, perhaps, instead of a Tyson Barrie. At the same time, though, I think this trade is very interesting, and even though it might still need some changes, I feel like for the Oilers, if they're able to get even one of Marc-Andre Fleury or Dominic Kubalik, that would be a pretty big success and would set them up so much better for the playoffs this year. Now, this next trade is pretty interesting, involving the Blues and the Rangers, and it goes as follows. For the Rangers, they will acquire Pavel Buchnevich, and for the Blues, they will acquire a second-round pick in Sammy Blais. Now, I don't know where this trade is coming from. Nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the NHL, but to get this big of a steal is insane. I mean, for the Blues, imagine offering Sammy Blais and a second-round pick. Imagine how dumb you need to be. Imagine? But now going to a trade offer that will actually happen this deadline, my goodness. Let's move on to a trade offer with SportsGamer91, proposing an interesting deal with the Leafs and the Blue Jackets. For the Leafs, they will acquire Max Domi and Dean Kukan. In exchange, the Blue Jackets will get Justin Hall and a 2022 first rounder. Now, I saw a lot of different ideas proposing Max Domi to the Leafs, and honestly, I could definitely see it. The versatility, playing all forward options, and having the speed that he has, I think will be super valuable to the Leafs. And you also got Dean Kukan, who is another interesting piece. When he has been healthy this year, played a pretty good two-way role in Columbus. Some solid depth options there, and you get rid of Justin Hall as well. That could be worth a first-round pick, though I think for the Leafs, maybe a second or third could still get that deal done. Now, this next one is especially interesting, involving the Leafs and the Canucks. Now, Jelly Jam says this: Toronto trades Justin Hall, Alexander Kerfoot, and a first for JT Miller. Now, I don't want to be really mean, but at the same time, for the Canucks, if they are going to trade JT Miller, we know that cap space is their #1 priority. If they do trade Miller, I feel like a first and more prospect-oriented package would come on Miller's side. I really doubt the Canucks would want Justin Hall whatsoever, so personally, I don't see this quite happening. But now going to a more realistic JT Miller proposal, in my opinion, involving the Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks. And this one comes from Justin, and he proposes this: the Canucks will receive Vitaly Kravtsov, Nils Lundqvist, a 2022 first rounder, and a 2023 second rounder, and of course the Rangers will get JT Miller. Now, I personally see Besser and Garland as way more likely to get dealt this deadline, but if we do see a JT Miller trade, I feel like this is what it would look like. And the big piece is being a first round pick in Nils Lundqvist. That's obvious, but also having good value in Kravtsov with a second round pick. I think that makes this pretty realistic and pretty real to what a JT Miller trade would look like. Now, speaking of realistic, we got this next one from Jingle Octopus, and they propose this: to the Montreal Canadiens, they will receive McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and to the Edmonton Oilers, they will acquire the entire Montreal Canadiens franchise. And personally, I mean, Marty St. Louis exists. He is the most valuable player in the entire league, okay? Did you see those thighs? They don't lie, I'm sorry to say. Now, this next one is really good. Of course, you have to evolve some big talent here, and it involves some big pieces. This one is interesting. Steve Dangle to Colorado for producer Drew to Toronto. Personally, I mean, this is a great deal for Steve. He gets to upgrade from consistent first-round losses to consistent second-round losses. pretty good deal for him, I gotta say. Now, this next one is another pretty interesting Philip Zadina trade proposal coming from my boy Tristan, and he proposes this. For the Detroit Red Wings, they will end up getting Eric Brandstrom in exchange for Philip Zadina. And personally, this is an interesting one. With Brandstrom, he's a guy that could also use a change of scenery, just like Philip Zadina, and I think could work pretty well in that power play going into the future and could add some offensive push for this Red Wings core going into the future. And with Philip Zadina, I think he could work pretty well under DJ Smith and potentially a more gritty system in Ottawa and could bounce back there. There's some interesting potential here though, and a 1-for-1 would certainly be fascinating. Now for this next one, we got a pretty huge 1-for-1 trade coming from Time for Hockey, and he proposes this between the Islanders and the Canucks. The Islanders will receive Brock Besser, and in exchange, Vancouver will end up getting defenseman Noah Dobson. Now, personally, although I'm not 100% convinced that Besser needs to be traded for Vancouver, at the same time, if they are going to deal him, Noah Dobson is probably the best asset you could possibly hope to receive. For the Canucks, we know they want younger defensemen, especially in a potential Connor Garland trade, but to me, this is hitting two birds with one stone. Noah Dobson has been great this season on a pretty struggling Islanders team, and I feel like he'd be perfect in Vancouver's system with the mobility that he has. But we're going to go to a couple Twitter comments here, and the first one is from Sam, who proposes a pretty interesting Leafs and Kraken trade, and he said this. To the Leafs, they'll receive Mark Giordano, 50% retained, Calle Yarncroc, and Riley Sheahan. In exchange, the Kraken will get Travis Dermott, Ilya Mikheyev, a second-round pick in 2022, conditional, would turn into a first if the Leafs win the Cup, and then 2023 fourth-round pick. And then Justin goes on to say the conditional should turn into a first if the Leafs make it out of the first round. And personally, I think both sides are kind of making some great points here. I think it would be a very interesting trade for the Leafs to get not just Mark Giordano, but a solid depth piece in Calle Yarncroc and potentially a fourth-line center on Riley Sheahan if you really need it. And for the Kraken, I could see where the value is coming back for. Obviously, you got Travis Dermott, who's a very solid young defenseman. Not going to be like this absolute stud, but a solid piece. And you also potentially have a first-round pick, but I agree. If the Leafs want to get past the first round, this is the type of deal that would definitely help them. And especially with how Jake Muzzin has regressed this season, adding another leadership guy like Mark Giordano, I think would definitely be key, especially on that defense. But going on to Mike King and Tranagovic, he proposes a trade between the Devils and the Canucks, and he says this. To the Devils, they will receive Brock Besser, and for the Canucks, they will get Ty Smith, Pavel Zacha, a 2022 second, and a fourth-round pick. Now, compared to Noah Dobson, I would definitely take the Islanders offer if that were on the table, but at the same time, I feel like this is a pretty realistic offer for what Brock Besser will be able to get back. Yes, Ty Smith hasn't been absolutely amazing, especially defensively in his NHL career, but I think with the Canucks, they could obviously, with Quinn Hughes already, develop pretty good offensive defensemen. You also got Pavel Zacha, who I think is a very underrated middle six piece, and you got a second-round pick and fourth-round pick on top of that. Maybe you want to have a third instead of a fourth there, but at the same time, I think that's pretty accurate to what the Canucks are going to be able to get. Now, we're going to go through an Instagram comment here by Jason, and honestly, this might be the worst trade offer I have ever seen in my entire life, and Jason says this. I know, it's going to be crazy. He says this, Connor McDavid for Sean Avery. I don't know who in the right mind thinks that Connor McDavid is the same amount of value as Sean Avery. Okay, this right here, this is Connor McDavid. All the way up here is Sean Avery's value. Okay, I want to set the record straight. Okay, this McDavid, this Avery, that is how it goes. If you have to include Draisaitl, first round pick, 2023 first round pick to even get close to Avery's level. It's just not happening. I'm sorry to say. Now going on to Nintendo fans offer where he says this. Jacob Chikrin to LA in exchange for Sean Durzi, Alex Turcotte, and a first round pick. Now personally, I actually really like this trade offer realistically. I think for the LA Kings, Jacob Chikrin is a really good fit. He's a guy that really could help their future and their now. And I think this is a pretty accurate trade. There maybe could be like a second round pick on top of this. But you get a pretty great defensive prospect in Sean Durzi, who's been great this year. You got Alex Turcotte, who hasn't been too good in LA system yet, but could explode in Arizona. And you got a first round pick and a potential pick on top of that, in my opinion, which could be included. To me, that would be a pretty accurate and interesting offer for the Coyotes that I think they could accept. But now going on to a really good one from Piper, and they say this. Yaroslav Halak for $3 and a bag of corn chips. Now, personally, for me, I think it's on the right track, but I feel like $2 is a little bit more realistic for Halak. I mean, $3, we're really getting too much at that point. And even a bag of corn chips, I mean, $2 in a bag of corn chips, you might get there, but $3, I might have to say no on that one. But going on to Quinn's potential trade offer, this one involving the Oilers, and he says this: Mikko Koskinen, an Oilers 2022 first, and Raphael Lavoie for Semyon Varlamov. And this one is interesting because with Varlamov, his health has kind of been in question, not just throughout his career, but especially over the past year. He hasn't played that many games this season, but I think for the Oilers, he'd be a very interesting addition. I mean, he's way better than Koskinen and Mike Smith right now, and I think come playoff time, he'd add a lot more value. But I think, honestly, for just a first-round pick in Mikko Koskinen, I could see this deal happening come trade deadline day. Now, this is another interesting one coming from Rohan, and he proposes a JT Miller for Philip Forsberg 1-for-1. Personally, I don't know what to even think of this deal. I think for the Preds, it would be interesting for them since Miller has more longevity and more leadership there, and for the Preds, they're kind of sneaky in this playoff race and could add something like that, and maybe it pushes them farther into the playoffs. For the Canucks, though, I feel like one of the main reasons why they keep JT Miller is because of that leadership, and with Philip Forsberg, that's not as prevalent in his game. So for the Canucks, it might not make as much sense, but I think for the Preds, this would be a very interesting deal, again, if they can't sign Philip Forsberg especially. Now, this next one comes from Callie, and she says this: Jost plus a prospect for Claude Giroux. Now, this won't happen because you need to include at least Nathan McKinnon, but even if it does, if the Avs lose in the second round again with Claude Giroux on their roster, I will be the most miserable person to all Avs fans out there. It is not going to be pretty. If it is Claude Giroux, though, good luck, because I really wanted to win him the Stanley Cup, but it's going to be bad when you lose in the second round. I just gotta say it. Now, for my last few trade proposals, this is, in my opinion, the funniest thing that we got out of this video, and it's the fact that on the Instagram story comments, there was this guy called Jake Osborne, who is just the funniest man alive. Cool, because what this guy did was he put 3 different trade proposals that went as follows: Giroux to Bolts, Giroux to Caps, Giroux to Leafs. Like, the entire league, Jake wants Giroux to go to. And honestly, like, the more I think about it, the more it just kind of feels like maybe Jake is just Claude Giroux in disguise. I mean, Jake, Claude, excuse me, I'm honored that you would want to be a part of this video, but if you're this desperate to get moved, that you go on an Instagram story for us and put like 3 different destinations, are you okay? Anyways, it's probably just a younger cousin of Claude Giroux that's just going on his behalf. And you know what, Jake? I appreciate you. You're fighting the good fight. But that'll be it for today. We had some amazing trade offers in today's video, and some honestly really realistic ones on top of some of the funny ones and the bad ones, like Sean Avery for Connor McDavid. I mean, still, again, I cannot believe that anybody thinks that Sean Avery is even close to the peasant level of Connor McDavid. It's offensive, but at the same time, those trade offers still need to come, and they're still pretty funny to look at. So that's at least that. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. If you did enjoy this one, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to the Sportsnet YouTube channel if you haven't already. Comment down below your thoughts on these mock trades, and let me know all your thoughts down below. Make sure you share this video with your friends, get the mock trades out there, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys so much for participating, for your input on the 2022 deadline, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.